Welcome back. Today, we're going to continue our conversations about women in tech and what it takes to become a data engineer in this industry. We're also going to talk about what data engineers really want in tools to make their lives easier. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another FUTRtech video podcast. The audio version of the podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most of the others, or you can find it at futr.buzzsprout.com. Today we're talking with Lee Blackwell, an architect and data engineer at Databricks, about why diversity and company culture matter. And she's going to fill us in on what data engineers really want. Now, Lee's bio says she is a confident, authentic woman who enjoys talking about modern data architectures and helping others achieve their goals. But she describes herself as a low-class comedienne, jaded data engineer, data queen, and Databricks fangirl all in one. So this should be a really fun one. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you. That's a lot of data.
Well, I am looking forward to this one because I think this is going to be a fun one.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me how you what your journey was and how you got where you are today.
Sure. I'd say, first of all, I'm a little bit of everything. I just describe myself as, a hippie, a tech nerd, a entrepreneur, a yogi, everything. I think we all have a little bit of that. But let's start with kind of the very basic. So I laugh. When I was 7 years old, I created my first business, and I swear it was a business. It was called Leave It to Lee, and it was a spin on your typical house and pet sitting business because I took it to the next level. Like I would go door to door. I had flyers. I got swag that said Leave It to Lee, and I would take it around and give gifts. And I made a great little living as a kid like that. And I joke too, I learned some of the best business and leadership principles of that age, such as delegation. Like I would go to spend the night at a friend's house and call up my dad to say, hey, can you go take care of this dog? But, I would still go get paid, or I would get paid later. So anyway, the entrepreneurial spirit is always there. And I know you guys too are entrepreneurs yourselves, so you get it.
I totally get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I got into the college years, I had to figure out what the heck I wanted to do. I definitely am one of those people who doesn't love the idea that we have to commit to 4 years and say we're going to study something. And I studied business because it sounded right with the entrepreneurial spirit. But I decided that just wasn't enough of a challenge for me. And my college was actually offering an undergrad in data science. And I was like, oh, cool. This is going to be able to give me an awesome career. I'll be able to kind of write my own ticket and let it take me where I want. But the reality is I came out of that data science degree, although I, got magna cum laude and all that, I came out with no confidence. And I'm like, who's going to hire me? No one's going to hire this data scientist out of college, which, if you're listening, if you're a young girl, come on, be real with yourself. People would love to hire you. But so I basically took the first position that came around, which was a Java engineer position at a large company. And I'm really glad I did, because I look back and I learned all the right principles and practices of a big organization at a younger age. Anyway, fast forward a few years later, and I said, all right, I need to change. I need to go across the country and just shake up my life. And I packed my life into my car, and I took a 10-day road trip with my best friend across the country, stopping in at Jazz Fest in New Orleans was the main attraction.
That's a good
one. Taking it day by day. And I landed in San Diego, and I had no job. I had no apartment. Luckily, there was Airbnb at that point. So I kind of bounced around a little bit, found an apartment, found a job, and continued to work in the startup industry in the big data space. So I have, kind of talking on the technical path, I've just let the waves of big data take me where they want, starting with, working in the Hadoop clusters and then into Spark as the days have gone on. And then throughout startups, I've been doing a lot of data engineering work. And then more recently, I joined Databricks as a solutions architect. And it really is, we'll get into this. It was the answer for a lot of the challenges I was faced with as a data engineer. So, I mean, there was a point, and I don't know, I'm curious. I know we've talked about this before, but there was a point where I said, I'm out of the tech career. I'm sick of this. Let me go just live in nature and not look at a screen all day. Can you relate?
Oh, totally. I have that feeling a lot.
Yeah. And then you're like, wait a second, how am I going to get paid?
Yeah, there's that.
And that's where the entrepreneurial spirit comes in. You're like, wait, maybe I could, I don't know, go sell my crafts, but guess what? That's not going to pay the bills like a tech career would. Anyway. Yeah, that's really how I've gotten here. And I'm really excited to be back in the space where I'm able to bring my full self to the table. So I actually told myself, it was COVID, it was summer of last year, where we all were introspecting and figuring out what the heck we're going to do right now with our lives. You know, do I keep going? Do I find a change? And I said, listen, you don't love to be totally hands-on keyboard programming. You just don't. Stop trying to do that. And I told that to the people who were interviewing me, and they're like, cool, we'll figure out what to do. You know, we got places for you. And that's where Databricks was like, we've got this position as a solutions architect where, yeah, you'll still be using your skills as a programmer a bit, but you're more or less face-to-face with people and explaining what this tech can do and how to solve it. And I got to tell you, it's a great fit for me. So
yeah, you seem like a people person, if I had to say.
A little bit.
Classify. So tell me a little bit about what Databricks is and what Databricks does real quick.
So Databricks helps organizations of all shapes and sizes figure out what to do with their big data and be able to do analytics, engineering, and data science all on that large data in a few words. Okay. Make sense? Perfect.
Totally get it. So, you know, I it sounds like Databricks has a really interesting culture, but I want to loop back for a second to something you said earlier about sort of, coming out of school not having the confidence in yourself, right? And I know that's a big issue. I mean, because when you look at men applying for positions, they tend to overstate their competence in a position, whereas women tend to feel less competent walking with the same level of competency, right? So I think there's definitely something going on there that's making it a lot harder for women to try to, get into these roles.
Yeah. I can remember it was at that first position at that large enterprise. It was actually at Vanguard, great company. And they were already doing it well when I joined my career, when I joined just out of college there. They already had a great balance of women and underrepresented minorities. So it wasn't like we had to talk about it a lot. But at the same time, it wasn't like we had to talk about increasing numbers all the time, which we would all like to get to. Right. But at the same time, they offered lots of great, lunch and learns and just avenues to go kind of build our own confidence. And I remember specifically sitting in the room when they hit us with that fact that you were just kind of hitting at, where you're pointing at, that a woman will look at a job rec and see 10 requirements and see one requirement that they don't fulfill. And they're like, nope, won't get it. But a man will look at that and say, oh, I have one of those things. Let me apply, and I think there's some truth to that. And more than anything, it's just like anything. It's just the awareness that that's going on. And there's, I don't know. Do you guys think there's a little bit of truth to the whole fake it till you make it phrase?
Being an entrepreneur in my heart, I think the core of any entrepreneur is a little bit of fake it till you make it, and this kind of sense of wing it and I'll figure it out. So I definitely would say yes to that question. Yeah. But I mean, I don't know that, what the implications of that necessarily are in the larger, scheme of things, right?
But especially out of college, right? When you come out of college, you're still young. You still haven't, you haven't paid bills. You haven't had to take care of yourself, be responsible for yourself. All of those things. At least for me, that was a huge burden, because all of a sudden, I needed to figure my life out, and that was just a tremendous amount of responsibility. But the other part was, I was intimidated by all these older people, and I was intimidated by people's titles. It's like, oh, that's the VP of sales, or that's the CEO. And people would say to me, they're just people. They're just people just like you and me, and you just got to talk to them, And once I felt more comfortable that these people are just people, You just got to, communicate with them well, create relationships. People love, people hate, people are scared. Just because you're the CEO of a company, there are days where I'm sure you have many sleepless nights and you're completely worried about your organization and you're wondering, how am I going to fix this in my company? So everybody has those fears, right? It's just, you got to jump in.
Absolutely.
Well, I got to say, from having been in, owned my own companies and been an executive in companies, that I constantly had imposter syndrome. I'm like, what am I doing here? I have no idea what I'm doing. But, you do have to figure it out, right? I mean, and the reality is that I think especially in tech, the only consistent thing in tech is the amount of change that is in tech. You kind of have to reinvent yourself constantly, right?
Yes.
So you have to have that confidence to do that, right?
Yeah. And so I pose that question because I think that fake it till you make it, the words don't sound good because it has the word fake in there. But, I'm kind of a neuroscience freak. We're all nerds here. Like there's truth to the fact that, when you go do something, you're actually training your brain to believe that you can go do it. And so that's just where I think that it's my confidence has been built over time by just going after it, going and making that first connection, and then taking a little bit of a moment to reflect, like, okay, I did it. We're good. Like I can take the next challenge and next challenge. And it just keeps coming like that.
Yeah. But, until you get yourself into really big trouble when you
so you're like, uh-oh,
I could totally do that.
I really am a fake. Uh-oh.
Brain surgery, whatever. That's when you step into the Dunning-Kruger syndrome, zone, and that's where it gets really dangerous, right?
Well, there's also, like Bipul Sinha. Bipul Sinha is an entrepreneur, and he's been an advisor to Chris and I. He's very, very successful guy, and he said something years ago that stuck with me when he said, "You only have 168 hours in a week. Do you want to do the easy stuff or do you want to do the hard stuff? Because you still only have that limited amount of time." Right. So you might as well do the stuff that's hard. You might as well do the stuff that is challenging. And I think, you got to always kind of be faking it until you make it. I think if you figure something out and you've mastered something, so then what's great about that? Like go on to the next thing and just keep pushing yourself. That's what life is all about. Right.
Well, it's funny. I had a business partner who, one time we had this debate because, this is the early days of the web. And, I was, doing stuff that had copyrights in it that were showing up on, you could Google it and find it all over the place, right? Because people were stealing code back in the days, right? And he's like, "Oh, this is terrible. We got to protect it." I'm like, anybody who's taking that can have it, because if they're doing that, we should be on to the next thing, And I think that's the way I've always sort of viewed it. It's like, whatever, it's like if somebody's, like doing that, we got to be constantly thinking about what's next, what's new, and you have to, and you're always out on a limb at that point, right?
Absolutely.
That's what tech's about.
Yeah, it's always having to innovate. And well, I want to talk about that a little later when we talk about Databricks and how we're a culture of kind of cannibalizing our own tech, because we got to get to the next thing. You always got to be innovating. Absolutely. But I want to get back to, I've just been thinking about this, is the imposter syndrome, that term, right? Yeah. It's just like any other label. You got to be careful with labels, right? Because if you look up what an imposter syndrome means, like it's a very umbrella term for like, hey, I'm a perfectionist, or I don't think I can do it. Like these are just normal thoughts. And I remember hearing the imposter syndrome when I was like a senior in college, and have always thought that, oh, I had the imposter syndrome. And then you're like that, then it kind of holds us back if you hold yourself to that. So kind of going back to this, you've got to foster that growth and change mindset all the time. Like, all right, maybe I am a little unconfident right now, but I can get past this. So it's good to think about it that way, but also be careful of labels in general. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I to some extent, I mean, I think for me, I feel like imposter syndrome is actually maybe a good sign for me, because it says that like I'm pushing myself outside of my comfort zone to do something, right? And when I feel like, oh God, I have no business being here doing this, it probably is like, hey, take it seriously and figure it out. But no, I do agree with you though, for a lot of people, like just, kind of lumping it all into that, it's hard for people to get out of their own way a lot of time. And I've seen so many people who didn't achieve the greatness that they could have achieved because they just got so wrapped up in feeling like they're not enough, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. I could name many people like that.
I think when we talk about women in tech, and there's a I see it as a man. There's a lot of barriers for women in tech, particularly in tech. I think tech's a very male-oriented field oftentimes, or it historically has. But well, I should go all the way back to the beginning when women were the sole programmers for most of these computers. But then somehow, men
Right.
took over everything and kind of made a mess of it. But there are a lot of barriers, right? And I think as men in tech, we see all these conversations happening on the side that don't include women, or all these things, and we are a little blind to the barriers that throws up for people. I mean, what's been your experience on that?
It's a hard one because I have yet to get into higher level leadership, where I think is more of the problem. And I know you guys talked about that on the last podcast, right?
Yeah.
I'd say as someone who's been primarily an individual contributor, like I feel more just like the door can be opened. I like to channel that boss lady energy and realize like I've got a different set of skills to bring to the table, and I just own that, and then I do that. Now, I feel rife with conflicting thoughts a lot though, right? Because especially since I'm in a place, and I bet you guys are, just the whole tech world is in a place where we're trying to get more women in tech or more underrepresented minorities into these positions. It's hard not to sometimes question, like, am I getting a handout? And then that feeds itself back into the imposter syndrome, right? It's like a weird two-way relationship there. Like, and so I don't know, you could look at that way, but I choose to say, maybe, but I'm going to take that. I'm going to take the handicap and I'm going to run with it. And I'm going to show these people that I actually am extremely skilled. And to be honest, every woman in tech that I've worked with is more than qualified for the role.
Well, I mean, if you look at the stats, actually, women are more qualified typically when they seek those positions because they feel they need to be to overcome some of the barriers that are in front of them, right?
One of the challenges that I've seen in my career is just like, oh, we should put the women in project management roles and people leader roles and in roles that when maybe they just want to be a pure engineer, like and bring those other skills to the table during that time. So that's definitely something that I've seen.
We talked about on the other podcast about sort of that concept of she's not strategic, but there was another article by that same person that I read that talked about the problem with sponsorship, right? Mm-hmm. There's the concept of mentors who will mentor people, but it really needs to go to that next level because, everybody can get kind of mentored, but not everybody gets sponsored into good positions. It's like, hey, let's give so-and-so a shot, or let's bring so-and-so into a meeting to speak, right? And that happens a lot more with men than it does with women. And I think, you're talking about, you haven't been in senior leadership yet, but I think that's one of the challenges we see a lot of women having getting into that senior leadership position. It's like, it's one thing to increase diversity by hiring, more diverse people, but you actually have to sponsor them into leadership positions, right?
Yes. The other challenge, it's hard to even put words around this, but it's like, you don't want to overcorrect. And like, every organization or every kind of extracurricular group is about like a women's network or like women in like, and you see pretty much 95% women. You do have some awesome allies of the other opposite sex that will join, but I can't help but think like, is that just creating more of like this cult mentality of the women at the organization? I don't know.
I think that men have that already, but it's less of a, I mean, it's formal in that it's built into the structure of things, but it's less formal in the sense that it's just kind of there and you don't have to worry about it. So women, I think, have to be more explicit about, organizing these types of things to make their presence known.
That makes sense. No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. I mean, I personally love it. I love to be able to give back. And I mean, that's my whole career since the beginning that I told you guys I wanted to start studying data science. Like, I feel like I was thrown into the women tech space. And I got to go to my first ever conference was the Grace Hopper Women in Computing celebration. And it was awesome. Just hearing from these keynotes of incredible women out there definitely started to give me that confidence that there's a great life ahead of me out there.
And I think having diversity in the data sciences world is really, really important because if you look at all the biases in data and the kinds of tools that we're building around all this data, not having, people participating who have different perspectives and different points of view is really, really problematic.
Yeah.
You know, we have this white American male, you know, bent on the things that we're building, and it doesn't serve not just, you know, diverse populations within the United States, but the world in general, because it's not all, you know, America. We're kind of a tiny piece of it.
Yeah.
So.
I've actually seen most of the data scientists that I've worked with are women. And I don't know if that's but a lot of data engineers aren't. There's a stratification there. Maybe it's the nature of the work that it's like very detail oriented and it's iterative, like really tweaking things, that maybe women seem to be more into that, or just kind of prone to being good at that. Whereas the data engineering, I don't know, can be a more of a complex, more system level. You have to get down and dirty on the Linux, you know, machine and all of that. It's a little different.
Well, you know, and maybe it speaks to that. I think it does take a little bit more to be a data scientist in some regards. You know, they tend to be PhDs and things like that. And maybe that's that, you know, like I got to be more qualified to get this gig kind of thing rearing its head. I don't know. Perhaps. But I agree with you. I have seen a lot of female data scientists, which is interesting. I mean, my sister is kind of a data scientist as well. She's got her PhD in sort of statistical sociology, and you know, she does that very similar things. So
do you
maybe
think
there's something to that?
Do you think the facial recognition classifications are going to start classifying you as a woman? Is that what you're trying to say? Maybe. They're going to be biased that way now.
You never know. I just wish they would stop looking at me at this point.
Right. That's a whole nother one I would love to talk about with you guys. Just like it's inevitable where we're going. And it's like, I told you earlier this week, Chris, it's just like, I went through my tin hat phase after I worked in an ad tech and was dealing with all the data. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, like, I need to turn off my location history every time, or my location tracking every time I go. I got off all social media at that point. I was just like, put my tin hat on and let me get out of here. But somehow it crept back in.
Well, I have worked on both the marketing advertising side of the house and the security side of the house. And those things do make me intensely paranoid. The security, I think it's very hard to be in security because it really kind of ruins your life.
Oof.
You know, everything that could hit you.
Yeah. I know some security guys. They, they'd agree.
they can get quite eclectic, the security folks.
Absolutely.
So tell me, you mentioned Databricks and sort of the culture of Databricks and you know, some of the things that are going on there. You know, tell me a little bit about that culture and you know what it's like for you there.
I think about even just kind of the 4 cultural values we have. I'm not going to recite them to you, but one of them is just to let the data decide. So, i.e., we are a data-driven company. We have to be. We build data tools to make other organizations be data-driven. And it's so true. Like that's how we figure out our product direction is all based on data. And so that's definitely one thing that's attractive about the culture to me. The other one is teamwork makes the dream work. I love to say this tagline. I'm going to keep saying it, but like, data is a team sport. You cannot do data. You can't have a data engineer over here and a data scientist over here and a data analyst over here. Like, you've got to be all working together. And that actually goes back to, if you listen to our CEO, Ali Ghodsi, talk, I mean, at Berkeley, where Spark, the open source project that Databricks was first founded around, they at UC Berkeley in their labs, they sat everyone together, you know, the statistics, the machine learning engineers with the computer science guys, like everyone was together. And that's how you can really solve tough problems, is bringing these diverse people together, coming back to diversity again. Right. So that's one of my favorite cultural values, is probably just teamwork makes the dream work. And it's both internal, but it's also external. Like when I go to work with clients, I feel like I just am a team member on that client's team. And I just assume that role.
So what do you think? Is it the people? Is it the leadership? Is it just sort of the nature of what you guys do? What sort of drives that culture, you think?
Yes. I mean, I think that it's pretty rare to see a company that was founded by engineers and they're all still the leaders of the company. You know, do you guys see that? I know you guys work with a lot of companies out there.
Well, I would say that I think that sometimes what we see is like, early stage of the company, you have like sort of the engineers as leaders, but they don't necessarily, when the company grows and scales, sometimes they have a hard time making that leap because they think in terms of engineering, not necessarily in terms of sales and marketing. And so that can get kind of problematic for some organizations. Some can make that jump, and some struggle with it. And some are smart enough to find somebody to do it for them. So,
well, the key is the teamwork, right? If you have a great team, then you got to stay in your lane. Like I'm a salesperson, so I know what lane I'm in, and I stay in that. Chris is the technical guy. I don't try to do his job; he doesn't try to do mine. Right? We just work together in order to get to the outcome.
Have you ever played opposite day before, where where Chris is the sales guy and you're the technical guy?
No, that would be.
No. Well, we
talk about
people sometimes think that.
Yeah. They think that, and again, that goes back to diversity and everything. People see the Indian guy and they're like, he's the technical guy. And I'm like, no, actually, I'm going to bum you out on this one, but it's not me. But I think that would go back to the intimidation part of it, honestly, to me, is that I feel like technology is moving so quickly and it's so hard to stay. Chris does a tremendous amount of research and reading, and, we meet with a lot of startups and stuff like that. He has to prepare for everything. So for me, like, I fake it till I make it, right? I just listen to Chris and I listen to these conversations. I'm just like learning along the way, but there's absolutely no way that I have the time or the energy to go and learn everything that Chris knows about, data. That's just not going to happen.
And I think that the job that Sandesh does is absolutely, utterly exhausting. He's on the phone constantly. He's meeting with people constantly. He's talking. He's like, go, 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 go. I mean, he's, up in the middle of the night, just, responding to people on email.
Trying to get money out of people.
So pick your poison.
Yeah. I wasn't smart enough. So
we always talk about what we do as like a theater. It's like I've got my role to play in the play, and he's got his role to play, and we kind of, everybody has to do their thing to support the other person.
What Databricks has been able to really do is lead from a value standpoint, right? It's not just coming in to sell them this technology. We come into our customer and they're like, we want to do data and AI. It's like, okay, cool. But like, what do you want to do? Like, what are you trying to solve here? And actually kind of help them figure that out, and then show them how the technology can enable their full teams to get there. And so I think that's another huge part of the culture, is like, we're not just coming in to sell you a platform. We're coming in to figure out and help you solve these big problems. And by the way, like, that's why I'm so happy to be in this role, where I mentioned that I was ready to jump out of this career. It's because, like, why I went to go study data science and why I was so interested in it when I was in academia is because I had this naive promise that I was going to solve all the world's problems with data. Like, I was just going to get out there and solve everything easy, right? And then, why I call myself a jaded data engineer is because over the past 10 years, I've effectively become a data plumber, or a data cleaner, or just this master of stringing together all of these brittle systems. So, like, yeah, tell your mom you're a plumber after all that college. Like, that's fun to say. But I mean, that's what I mean is, like, it's, we have this tech that's awesome, this great platform that solves a lot, but we're really trying to help these companies figure out, like, and solve these big problems. And that's what's fun to me.
We always talk about this. It's like, I just want to do cool stuff. You know, I mean, and data science right now is where the cool stuff is. A lot of that cool stuff is happening, right? I mean, it's cool because it's such a huge and growing field right now, and it's just getting started, really. And that's where data scientists there's not enough of them, because I think it's that data scientist role to really understand what they're doing with the data, right? I think a lot of people just kind of rush into things and they don't, see all the implications of what they're building. Yeah.
Oh, you could fake whatever data you wanted. But I think as a data scientist, but that's also why I say I thought data engineering was the way to be. Like, we like, that's the owner of that garbage in, garbage out, and the data cleaning and figuring out, really, is this high quality data or not, paired with the data scientist. I mean, future state, I think about this, like, I don't know if we'll have those kind of delineations between a data scientist and a data engineer in 10 years. Hopefully it'll be kind of one person with the right tools in their hand.
So Lee, from your perspective, how much of the data problem is like a technical problem and how much of it is a people problem?
Ooh, that's a great question. Yes. I mean, it's the way that, kind of what I was just saying, like we've created unnecessarily these silos. So now it is a people problem, because you have silos of a data stack that data analysts use, which are probably primarily like data warehouses powering them. And then you have data scientists and engineers maybe working in like the data lake paradigm. And so now you've got people trying to make all these handoffs, so many systems in play. And then that becomes definitely an organizational and a people problem. And then, the harder people problem around data is like, who owns it? Some organizations have it where the IT owns all of the data, and then all the lines of business are consumers of that data, and they have different priorities. And so that becomes a challenge for sure as well. That's definitely that people problem. So trying to flip that model upside down, where you almost have like those teams working together in more of like a hub and spoke kind of center of excellence type of way is definitely where we're trying to get to as a whole in this industry, I would say. But yeah, that's a hard question. It's both. I think that, like I said, those siloed stacks are the technical problem that we have we've iterated through the data warehousing life cycles into kind of the data lakes and this whole cloud boom architectures. And then now we're trying to standardize on what's that middle ground. And that's where, Databricks comes in. We've been the pioneers of this whole concept called the lake house, bringing both of those together. And I mean, it makes sense. So we've been talking about this as a data engineering and data, professional context for a while. Like, why do we have to keep moving data around? Why can't you just keep it in one place and put the tools on top of it? And I think we're getting there. We're definitely getting there.
I to that question though, I feel like the tech problem is, they're both big problems. The people, the data and the tech problem, but I feel like the tech problem is an easier one to solve, because some of the big data problems aren't really with the data you're collecting. It's about the structures that exist around the systems that do the collection. Mm-hmm. That's so problematic. And those are going to actually take, potentially societal changes to fix, right?
Yes.
So that's a really interesting problem too,
Yeah. What are your favorite data sets? Like what interests you guys the most? Just curious.
I don't know that I have a particular favorite in that regard, but I haven't really been in the data world for a long time. Mm-hmm. When I was coming up, it was the early mid 90s. I was doing a lot of my database stuff into the early 2000s, and relational databases were the exciting thing at that point, right?
Old news.
Old news. I know. I got to say, I do enjoy. I have a sick pleasure in normalizing databases. I think that's a really fun thing to do.
I could find some. Wow.
Yeah.
I got some people.
It's like an OCD problem, I think.
and my answer to that would be totally different. Like what does interest me is I'm trying to figure out like what, especially with COVID and everything else happening in this world. It's like, what actually makes people happy, and how, what are the characteristics that people have in their life or experiences, or what can I do to create a scenario which gives me the most chances of being happy? Because man, we all work a lot and we do all kinds of stuff every day. And I'm just wondering, like, is this what happiness looks like? Like just working long hours and, it's just, but like what happens? I go meet my family. I'm super happy. I see friends. I'm super happy. I see my kids in their sports or something else. Those are the happy moments. I just need more of them, So how do I live a life? If there's like data and stats around that could tell me, these are the things that if you invest in, this is how you'll be happier. That would be interesting to me.
And we kind of come full circle to probably the answer of like, well, just turn off your dang computer. like, stop looking at the data. No, but I agree. My answer to that actually comes over the past year of just like, it's, I don't know, you will laugh at this. Like, can we figure out with data, like to prevent crazy conspiracy thoughts or like fake news, right? Can we figure that out? But you try to tell someone who's a subscriber to all that, they're like, oh, look at my data model that proves that you're wrong. They'd be like, haha, like, no, you've been got. Like that was one that really I thought about a lot this year, but that's a hard problem too.
Well, when we get into the world of AI and ML, I always say that, like, I think it's there's two sides to that. Cause like, you can use AI ML to thwart misinformation, right? Mm-hmm. But you can also use AI ML to create misinformation. Yes. And you can and it's sort of that defending, paradigm always. It's harder to defend than it is to attack, right? Yes. And I think that, ultimately we have to just realize the problem is us. We are the problem. The human brain is not suited for dealing with this stuff. Yes. And it comes down to, like, misinformation is all about the emotional context it puts you in. You can use actually factual information to produce disinformation because in a context, it will promote an emotional reaction that's problematic. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's a very complex problem to solve. And at the core of it is just this emotional response from people. Right. So I don't know how you fix that.
I don't know either. That's why I spent too many nights thinking about it. I was like, all right, I'm going to go check out and go on another van trip, which, by the way, I don't think I mentioned that I have a van, and that's my way of like escaping my tech life is taking long weekends, exploring nature and pretending like I'm a bum and in my van.
Well, that's awesome. YouTube van life channels are extraordinarily popular. So, there's always that.
Yes. I've been building up my van Instagram page, and it's it surpassed my personal one pretty quickly. That was sad.
Explain it to me. Give me a picture.
Please don't picture one of these like $60,000 Sprinter 4x4 vans. Nope. 8K cash for a 2010 like creepy cargo van, as I like to call it.
So people bring their children inside when you drive by, basically.
I have candy. Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I did a lot of time kind of like interviewing like other people in vans for a couple of years, because it's always been this romantic idea of mine. Like, especially people in tech are able to kind of figure it out, maybe find some places on the road where they can get a hot spot and be able to work. So I interviewed some people, but effectively I realized, all right, I'm not the person who's going to be able to live 24/7 in a van. I need a little bit more creature comforts, but let me have this be like the long weekend, maybe 1 week at a max, like 1 week at a time, camper van. So went up to LA, and it's an old Time Warner cable van. So it was taken care of well. So that was nice. Just don't want it to fail on me. And it's just been a fun project throughout the end of the pandemic and into now. I joke, it's like any software engineering project. I got it and was like, ooh, I'll be done with this in a month. Guess what? It's been 10 months and I still haven't even gotten it. It's like, shit. Every project that comes out, you realize, this is a lot more than I thought, but it's fun. It's a fun thing to do. So,
well, it's nice because you live in California where you actually have somewhere to go. Here in the Midwest, we could get the van and just drive around in circles. It's like, everything's kind of the same for the 4 to 5 hours out in any direction.
Yeah. So it's fun. Maybe one day I'll upgrade to a Sprinter, but not today.
Some of those are nice, and they get well more than well north of 60,000 too.
Oh yeah.
We talked a little bit about sort of what you do at Databricks, and the fact that you have a lot of things going on at Databricks, but for you the key was you're building something for data engineers. I mean, could you speak to that a little bit about like what is it that data engineers actually want?
Yeah. I mean, and I say that because I come from the data engineering world, but to put a broader umbrella, like Databricks is building a platform for any data professional, like a data analyst, a data scientist, a data engineer. But from the data engineering perspective, to kind of give the history, right? Databricks was created by the creators of the open source project Apache Spark. But like we talked about earlier, they're smart leaders, and that's not going to be the thing forever. So as the company has grown, they've adopted new open source tech and put that out in the market. And the biggest thing that was kind of an aha moment for me to see was the open source project Delta. What Delta does is basically bring a reliability and transaction layer on top of your existing data lake, or probably your data swamp, right? Because that's, you were talking about this earlier, Chris, like you're familiar with the data warehousing world and relational databases. And then when we got to the data lake paradigm, it's like, all right, let's just throw all of our data, unstructured, structured, all of that into these cheap object storage distributed across many nodes. That's great. But like, what happens when it would power some AI use cases and do what you need to do there. But hey, I also still want to do my BI and transactional reporting. And like we talked about earlier, that's where you end up with these siloed systems, because you might be doing that, the transactional reporting in one place and the other in the other place. So what Delta adds is the ability to do the updates, deletes, the time traveling back right there on your open source, data. So it's all based on the Parquet file format. Are you familiar with Parquet?
I am not familiar with Parquet. So
that's something for you to go read up on tonight, Chris. I will test you. I will test you. So to put a little bit more, it really just helps you. It basically, in a few words, it just brings both of those capabilities together. The ability to do the ability to do AI and ML, but also transactional reporting all on your data lake. And that's powered by Delta. More than that, we're growing, this company, going back to the culture, it's a bunch of engineers who get it. They come from the same place I do, and we're trying to build the next capabilities on top of this framework. And so one of those that I see is, of course, data quality. We talked about it just a minute ago.
Yeah.
And so now we're advancing the whole project to be able to have expectations. Can I expect something on my data? So if I have data flowing into the source system, I can say, hey, I want to expect that this particular data record should not have a null value. And if it does, what should I do with it? Should I quarantine it? Should I let my pipeline keep running? So all of that is just kind of upfront developing your pipelines to have these rules so that someone like myself doesn't get like the pager alarm in the middle of the night that this dang null value got in the system and I have to get up and go solve it, right? Go fix it right then. So that's definitely something that has been, pivotal for me, is just being brought into this world of what Delta can offer a data engineer. And so that's where I see the bread and butter of us right now is really moving forward with what Delta can do.
Yeah, I think the data pipeline and the data enrichment piece is always a really interesting thing, because I think, but I could imagine the challenge with that is that, when you sell up, like in an organization, you're going to buy these products, and you have to explain to your executives who are going to finance that, like, oh, this will make my life easier. Like, I don't care about your life being easier. Like, show me AI ML,
Yeah.
But those are the things that are actually really important about, like, because we talk about garbage in, garbage out, right? So having that data pipeline enrichment stuff is really important. And then like you say, just like feeding that back into the system is another real big piece of it.
Yeah. The other thing you just made me realize too is like what data engineers want is the ability to develop quickly and to be able to use open source tools, right? Like in general, maybe some people love using Informatica. Good for you. But it's like, that's where I've spent my time as a data engineer, and why I call myself a jaded data engineer is having to productionize open source Spark, plus, all the pipelines and the orchestration that goes through it. And that in itself would take you months to even get out the door, and then having to performance tune all of that. And so that's where Databricks has tried to alleviate all of that for you. So we have the managed Spark in there. We have managed Delta all in there. But at the same time, we get it. We're not trying to lock you in. So tomorrow you can get rid of Databricks and hey, you still have open source Delta and open source Spark, and your pipelines should keep running. So that's another like great benefit, I would say, of Databricks, is that we, it's a fine balance. Of course you want to stay open because that continues to drive innovation. If we were to close off the doors tomorrow and, have all these customers and all their data, then you can kind of decrease the innovation level, right? Because then you can just up the charge of your product and we're good. We got customers. So that's hinting back to the culture too, is why it's so fun and always changing, because we have to stay on top of our game. But where I was going with that is it's that fine line. We need to be open source, but as a company, they also have to make money. So that's why they take the open source tools, but then they add kind of some goodies to optimize them.
And I think, the one thing we've seen, we've worked with a lot of, portfolio companies, venture capital companies and things like that, and a lot of startups and just people doing a lot of cool stuff. But we keep seeming to come back to this, how important open source is to the whole tech ecosystem, right? And, in the early days of open source, nobody was, getting behind it. It was, commercial products are what businesses have to run on. And that has completely flipped on its head.
We still see them in use, but yeah, it's all open source. At least the people that I want to work with are definitely, they've committed to open source. It's the way to go. And you've got to bet on cloud. Like, I don't know how many people, do you guys work with people who are still sitting on-prem and figuring out their cloud strategy? Or are you also working with people who have committed to moving to the cloud?
When you get outside of especially Silicon Valley, the adoption of cloud is way lower. And, when we look at major markets, we see bigger shifts. But even outside of major markets, it's really the adoption of cloud is very low. And I think that there's a couple challenges there, right? One is that I think there's this enablement problem, right? They don't have enough qualified people to help them move to the cloud because, everybody can kind of try that lift and shift, but when they try the lift and shift, they're like, oh, wow, that's really expensive. Let's come back.
You're stuck with the same problems. Yeah.
Right. You're stuck with the same problems, just they cost more. And, in order to retool things to get them into the cloud is complicated, and you have to have the right kind of people to do that. So that adoption has been a lot slower than it's very uneven across the country and across markets. I don't know, Sandesh,
Yeah, totally. It just depends on the company. Some customers have been able to figure it out and make it happen and invest in it, and others haven't. But I also feel like with COVID, with the uncertainty of our politics and the economy and the virus and just everything, racial tensions and just everything that is happening, I think a lot of companies are just like, if it's not broke, I don't want to fix it. I just want to get my financials in order to make sure that I have a good operationally, financially responsible company. So, which contradicts cloud, because cloud, you have to spend more money. You have to get those skills. You have to build it. You're going to be those builds, in the cloud. We're finding a lot of customers that were predicting $40,000 that became $500,000, right? And then they're wondering, like, well, how did that happen? Well, this is what happened. And so, and are you ready are you ready to make that investment? And I think that's where the rubber has met the road. I think ultimately we're going to get there. I just don't think it's going to be in the time that people want it to be. And so when you hear from either CIOs or CTOs or VPs, like, we're going to be in the cloud, Sandesh, in the next year or 2 years, and we're not going to buy any more infrastructure, whatever it is, I don't say anything anymore, because if I say anything, then I'm just being negative to their agenda, and they have to do this, right? And so I'm just going to try to be there and support them however I can, whenever I can, Yeah. But most of them are struggling with it,
Although I would say that one of the interesting things about the pandemic is it has actually really accelerated the cloud adoption for people. Yeah, because it just made a life easier for things.
Yeah, and have all these big hardware stacks sitting in some data center that like they can't even go access or something. But
And there's so many reasons for cloud, right? I mean, even getting hardware out to people is getting tough. You got shortages on hardware. I mean, there's so many little things even in that whole operational side, the sales operational side. You're taking out so much of that, So there's so many reasons to go to the cloud, right? It's just that it's just not easy to do.
Yeah,
so what do you see, Lee?
I mean, I think I've been centered in this data in cloud space. So maybe I'm a little different, but I mean, I think we're all, like you said, I think we're all moving there eventually. What scares me sometimes, I always get a little, healthily scared. It's just like, okay, now we have dependence on these 3 big vendors. Like, and I don't know, do you guys have that feeling? All of a sudden I'm like, my LinkedIn is down right now. Oh, but so is my like other platform. They must be using Azure. You know what I mean? Like Azure must have had an outage today. And you're like, wow, we're very dependent on these guys. And so that's where the next phase that we're already kind of ready for is multi-cloud. And some of these highly data-driven companies are already figuring out the multi-cloud strategy where they can kind of fail over to GCP or AWS or Azure. They'll doing not at all. So yeah, it's interesting.
I still think though that cloud is a better option because you know, AWS runs their data centers better than 99% of all the corporate data centers, you know, for sure. I mean, this is so much more technical capabilities with the people running those data centers than most companies have the ability to bring into their organization. And the other piece of it is, hey, if AWS is down and all this other stuff is like, it's the pressure isn't so much on me when the stuff goes down.
I didn't just fat finger something. Whoops.
It's like everybody's down, so they're all freaking out.
I mean, it's kind of unspoken. We didn't say it, but it's like clear, like with the data space, it's so necessary because you just get that elasticity. Like you can scale up and down workloads. That's the benefit. Now I do understand it. I see it when people just don't do it right and they're spending way too much money. But then you got to have a talk and figure out how to do that. It's funny. One of like the default features of Databricks is just auto terminating clusters. Like I'm glad it's a great feature because people forget that. People, you know, spin up a cluster in X cloud and forget to spin it down, and boom, come in the next day and they just charge their company, you know, however much to keep that beefy cluster up and running. So I think that's there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah, no, I think, like Sandesh said, and you said, it's definitely the future. It's definitely where things are headed. And I think, you know, at some point, it will fade into the background a little bit too. You know, which you know, brand you're with is not going to be necessarily as important because I think a lot of it's going to get abstracted, you know, and you're going to be consuming tools that are just, you know, so abstracted from the underlying infrastructure that it's not going to matter to most people. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see.
So tell me, you know, we've talked a little bit about what data engineers want, what you know, you're passing things getting to here, but what's next for you? I mean, climbing that corporate ladder?
See, that's the thing. there's that option. There's of course that option, but I just, as I introed and all that, like I feel there's a lot out there for me just to shine as an entrepreneur in some way. I still have this dream of going on Shark Tank, but like my friends joke with me, they're like, if you were to go on Shark Tank, it means that your business is like, what are you doing wrong? Like, why do you have to go sell to Shark Tank? And I'm like, I don't know, just for the 15 seconds of fame, just to walk up there and be like, I want $1 million for 100% stake in my company. Just sell it off right there. That would be fun. I don't know. I see a lot more for me as an entrepreneur in some way. Doesn't mean that I can't do that within an organization, right? You can boot up businesses within an organization. For now, I'm very happy with Databricks and excited to really help be part of this rocket ship where it's going and taking off with them.
You know, as somebody who's been around the block a few times, like I have, but I would say that, you know, entrepreneurship is a really valuable skill, and it's valuable not just in, you know, creating a startup, but it's being entrepreneurial within the job you have. Because if you have that, if you bring that spirit to it, you know, not only, you know, do you end up doing cool things, but it makes you much more valuable. And then you don't get stuck in that constant churn of whatever it is that you do, you know?
Yeah. I mean, more personally too, I want to make the same mistake that you guys did. I want to have kids. That'll happen at some point, I'm sure. But
yeah, well, I mean, it really is the only worthwhile thing I've ever done in my life is having kids, you know, at the end of the day.
This is true. I mean, talk about minimizing work, you know, like in my younger years, I defined myself. This is, you know, unfortunately, this is the truth. You know, that I defined myself by my work. And if I was doing good, then I felt like I'm doing a good job, you know. Now, I don't feel that way. It's totally different. You know, it's like as long as the family is good, my kids are good, you know, and like everything, this work thing, I do it, but I don't want to be defined by it. You know, there's other things that I want to be defined by, you know.
It takes an entrepreneurial spirit to have kids, so.
It does.
And sure talk about fake it till you make it, man. That is
I guess I can
central to having kids. I keep telling my daughter she was our beta.
You're your beta. Yeah, you get to this point in your life. Yeah, exactly. Funds. Maybe I'll get to a state where I can have like 4 nannies or something. No, I don't know. Well, I heard that was a really relevant point. It really resonated with when you all were talking with Ravi Patel, where it's like in this day and age, we're a very individualistic society. I uprooted my life away from my family. Like in traditional cultures, you've got an entire family network to help with that. But nowadays we're forced to kind of figure out how to do that still with our own little networks around us.
Lee, thanks so much for coming on. It's awesome to hear your perspective. It sounds like you're doing cool things and you're going to continue to do cool things, and can't wait to see what those cool things are. Thanks so much for coming on.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure. Happy Junior Friday again, guys.
Yes. And I think there's a future in, hosting your own podcast at some point too.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
There's not enough of them out there.
No, definitely not. Especially van life ones, right?
True.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, click that like button, hit that subscribe button because that helps the channel a ton. And if you want to get notified when we post new content, click on that bell icon and you will get those notifications. I'll see you in the next video.